joining us for the next video in the countdown to the Property Investor Show, which is taking place at London Excel on the 1st and 2nd of April. And today we're running another mini panel debate preview to give you a flavour of what you can expect when you actually attend the event. As I like to say, this is just really the sizzle. You have to get yourself along to Excel to get the actual steak. And I'm delighted to be joined by two very well-known and seasoned commentators from the property community. I've got Richard Bowser, who is a landlord and editor of Property Investor News, and Ben Beadle, who is also a landlord and NRLA CEO. And of course, I'm a long-time landlord as well. So guys, we've got an interesting topic to dive into today. Really just talking about the property market in general. I'll come to you first, Richard. We've been through such turbulent times in the last 2 years, well actually probably in the last 5 years, since Brexit, since Section 24 was launched, since COVID, and now obviously we've got a lot of concerns about unrest due to what's going on in Ukraine, which will have some kind of impact on the economy, which is very strongly tagged to the property market. So what's your view on the property market today as we speak?
Okay, well, this will be, as we're upcoming to the Property Investor Show, this will be 20 years that we've been exhibiting and been doing talks at Excel. And what I can say is here we are. This is just another part of this ongoing roller coaster that we've seen since 2001, 2002. And of course, we had the aftermath of 9/11, and then we had the Iraq War, and now we've got another horrendous situation out in Ukraine. In terms of its impact on the property market, obviously, as is being widely reported, Russia, Ukraine, significant resource exporter, oil, gas, Ukraine, the breadbasket of Europe, being described as. Anyone that thinks this is not going to impact us, the UK community, the 63 million, whatever, and of course the whole property sector, it absolutely is going to impact to some degree. And it's certainly going to impact on every household in terms of fuel and food prices and inflation. And this is already, as we know, being on an upward trend, primarily because of the COVID situation, which unfortunately we've had to experience for the last 2 years.
Absolutely. Well, Ben, where's this going to take the property market? These things that Richard has been mentioning, perhaps I could see that people might become slightly nervous about buying a home or moving home. And I can also see perhaps that people might think about moving to smaller properties which are more energy efficient. Do you kind of think any of those kind of mini trends will start to appear?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think if you're an aspirational homeowner at the moment, then you're about to get almightily clobbered if you haven't already been clobbered, frankly. And that is, the cost of living, energy. We still to have the full impact of what's playing out in Ukraine and Russia. So, without wishing to sound a bit downbeat on this subject, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. But I am believe it or not, I'm a positive person when it comes to the private rented sector and the property market. I do think it will present opportunities, but it's all about having your wits about you, right? If you're a landlord or an investor, and we've got some very significant challenges on the horizon, not just on our own shores, but in other shores as well. And we know that landlords are a resilient bunch. So, it's time to make sure that you have all of the knowledge at your disposal and make sure that you're well armed to take.
Indeed. I mean, Richard, this is really why the Property Investor Show is actually happening at such an opportune time to really equip investors and landlords to be aware of what could potentially happen, because it's much better to think kind of in prevention mode than to actually be in cure mode. So this is why we love the show, isn't it? Because it's this amazing learning resource.
I can recall being on a panel back in autumn of 2008, just as Lehman Brothers, that whole financial sector crash was unfolding, and everyone was checking their phones on the panel, as the panel was a live panel in front of 200 people. And financially, we were looking at some sort of Armageddon. But stuff moves on. The roller coaster goes up and it goes down. And as Ben has just alluded to, you just need to make sure you've got your risk mitigation worked out, that you've got a good contingency fund, that you don't overstretch. Every single disaster in terms of an overstretched property developer or a landlord that takes that, it's all about people overstretching, overgearing at the wrong time in the cycle. And unfortunately, this is just another fairly big bump in an ongoing property cycle. I've been in it now in London for far too many years, actually. And there's been lots of humps and bumps. My first property in North London, I paid just over £13,000 for. You can't even buy a garage door for that in London or whatever now. So it is just about making sure that you've got a robust business model. You're not impinged on one particular sector. We've just done an article V, which I'm sure you can relate to, on terms of holiday lets, and there's an example of a sector which a couple of years ago went absolutely from pretty good outlook, all of a sudden short-term boom, a bust, and then of course last year fantastic boom, and lots of staycation holiday let, particularly coastal, and did very, very well. So yeah, Ben's also alluded to some other stuff, in terms of the regulatory side, the way that government's been clamping down. I did a piece last week on another platform talking about the impact of Section 24 and how that's played out. And of course, now we're seeing significant shortages of rental accommodation. I would say sealed bids, but lots of people chasing one rental property as soon as it comes to the marketplace. The RICS monthly survey of the rental market and sales, lots of reports all around the country of agents struggling to have properties on their books to let. So from the point of view, to summarize it from my perspective, it's a great opportunity coming up, because there will be some fear out there, and unfortunately people will be in more difficult circumstances than has been in the case perhaps. But it's also a time, maybe if you're well prepared in next year or two to pick up some stuff which in the type of market we've had in the last 2 years, where it's been really difficult in the last 18 months for many people to get good stock. Maybe that's going to change a little bit, but it doesn't mean to say there aren't some risks ahead.
No, indeed. And Ben, you and I, when we do our Landlord Lens collaboration together, we're often talking about amplified risks and so on. And I think, we've all been investors for long enough to know that one of the amazing things about being in property investment is that for every black cloud, that there'll always be a silver lining if you care to look for it. Richard just highlighted holiday lets as an example, which is a strategy that's done extremely well despite the very challenging conditions. And I think part of going to the Property Investor Show, it's going to look for that silver lining, isn't it?
It will, and what we know about landlords is that they're a resilient bunch. When the chips are down, they go and find some chips elsewhere, right? And that's exactly what's happened to the short-term let market. But dear oh dear, talk about the government shooting itself in the foot. Who would have thought that the government would, through the taxing of landlords, think that supply would have diminished? Well, everybody apart from them thought that. So it's no surprise why we are here, but the show itself will present other opportunities, and that is the point that we find ourselves at. We've been doing lots of research, and I saw your piece, Richard, as well, about the supply of housing. This is the most pressing issue around, and we're going to need to find more of it. We've not only got 12,000 people in temporary accommodation that have come over from Afghanistan, but we are now going to be bringing people over, and landlords are going to be lent upon to provide accommodation for them as well. All of this is coming at a really challenging time, where the backdrop against energy efficiency changes, cost of living, regulatory change that Richard alluded to. And so, it is an opportune time to see what else is out there. It really is as simple as that.
Indeed. I mean, Richard, we get a lot of newcomers coming to the show. They're looking to dip their toe in the water. It's great that they want to educate themselves. So if we just talk about your bog standard vanilla buy-to-let, your 2 or 3 bedroom terrace in a good area with a good school catchment, good transport links, is that still a worthwhile investment in your opinion?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because as Ben's just alluded to, and I've alluded to in much more depth in another article last week, supply is just not happening. So providing you take a business approach and a more professional approach than some people have over many years taken, then in my opinion, provided, and I would say with one proviso now, and that's you've got to sort out your tax structure at the beginning, how you buy and the way that you buy. I think one of the leading buy-to-let lenders, I think I won't name names, but 80+% of their mortgages now for buy-to-let residential property investing are done through LLPs, limited liability partnerships, or limited companies, because that, in terms of the tax structure, is for many people, not everyone, and I'm not recommending this. I'm suggesting that people need to look at this very, very carefully. In terms of the way that they're positioned for their tax. But notwithstanding that, listen, when I look back on some of my investments, it's just about being in the game, and working your way through the cycle, and make sure you don't over borrow, and let inflation work its magic. For many people now, irrespective of people who get focused on yield, which obviously, the higher yield, the higher your income relatively, providing you've not exaggerated costs, but you'll get, providing you don't overgear, in which case, then your net yield is going to be low, etc. But, and then just let time, look after your customers, look after your tenants, look after your property. None of this is rocket science. It's actually fairly straightforward. But unfortunately, what is that adage about common sense? Sometimes it's not that common.
Chiming back to what Richard said about inflation, Ben, this is one of those silver linings, because obviously over long term, inflation actually does erode your debt. So if we dig deep enough, we can always find an opportunity or an angle. And again, I think this is what's so good about the show, is that you not only get exposed to all the different ideas, but also to all the partners that can help you. And, I always advocate landlords should join a landlord association. I mean, it's just a no-brainer. It's such good value for money. And Ben, we want to encourage everybody to really think about going to the show, meeting new partners, finding the right people to support them, and adopting a professional approach to their business to help mitigate their risk, don't we?
Totally agree, and I think your cat agrees 100%.
Sorry about that.
Certainly about joining the NRLA at least, and that is a wise cat if ever I saw one. But no, joking aside, it's absolutely the right place to go. It can be a bit of a minefield out there. Organisations like ours and others will be able to guide landlords through the right sort of partners to jump into bed with, and give them a fairly good steer about the ones to avoid, because that shouldn't be overlooked as well. There are some pitfalls out there, but you talk about the cost benefit of inflation and so forth. And I think the one thing that investors are going to have to be acutely aware of is the impact, not just on themselves and their investment. That may have a silver lining potentially, but your customers, what are your renters, your tenants feeling? What are their circumstances? If you are referencing people that are on the cusp, and that the situation is going to get worse, is that going to make you think differently? Are you doing the right sort of checks? And these are all, that's one example of many, but this is where the Property Investor Show can really bring all of those key partners together for you to, soak it up like a sponge and try and avoid some of the issues that have befallen others.
As I keep saying, it's about riding the cycle. It's about not overgearing, buy selectively. I mean, the game has changed. I would think, when I look back now, not only do people become more professional, but in order to get a good return, you have to adopt more of an adding value approach, perhaps. Doesn't mean to say there's anything wrong. What is wrong? What am I saying here? What is wrong with, say, selectively buying a property once every 10 years and ending up after 30 years with 3 properties after 35 years of ownership, where you don't even have to manage? And the likelihood is, over 30 to 35 years, if you've managed those 3 properties properly, if you've looked after your customers, if you've kept the property up to date, you're going to be way, way in excess in terms of your net worth than the average Brit that's still retiring on a pension pot of, in real terms, not a lot. So I completely agree with what's been said about the show. As I say, we've been attending now for 20 years now with Property Investor News and made some great connections over that period. We go back, we see some of our subscribers time and time again, they turn up at the show. And it's just about picking up that one nugget or two, by listening, by observing, by taking into account what different people are saying, and then reflecting in that yourself, what you're trying to do in your locality, and the individual strategy that you feel works best in that area. Because what is working maybe in Barking and Dagenham isn't necessarily going to be so effective in Knightsbridge and Mayfair over the next 5 years, as an example.
Well, you've kind of preempted my final question, really, because, I was going to say to Ben that one of the things that we love about property is it's not one size fits all. You can do it to your level, to your goals, to your risk threshold. You shouldn't be trying to be in competition with anybody else. The only person you should really be in competition with is yourself, to provide a better service for your tenants. But Ben, when we talk about the property market, it's actually thousands and thousands of micro markets, isn't it? Because Richard talked there, about even going down to a granular level in your area to understand what's going on down your street. So what's happening in the rest of the country may actually be completely irrelevant to what's going on in your local patch. And people need to bear that in mind, don't they?
They absolutely do, Vanessa, and we do talk about this on the lens, don't we? That if you're going to go and buy a car, you're going to test drive it a few times, you're going to read a few magazines, or look on, that's a bit old hat, but look online at comparisons and stuff like that. The same is about property. You need to know the market that you're investing in. If you don't bother, or at least make sure that you find out, because my market around here in West London is very different to other markets in Wales, Manchester and the like. Sure, there's some overriding themes of stuff that you will need to get right, but knowing your market, knowing your agents, knowing who your target audiences are is your bread and butter. If you don't get that right, you're going to fail. Simple as that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both very much for joining me on this call. And as I mentioned, this is just like a little preview of what you'll be getting at the Property Investor Show itself. There's lots of different panel debates going on. We love panel debates because they really tease out the issues, really go down to a granular level, and there's also a chance for you to have your questions answered by the experts as well. It's free to attend, so get yourself along to Excel London on the 1st and 2nd of April, and we will all see you there.